not eligible. I realize that.
Well, I mean, you could if you wanted to. It's just,
Yeah.
you'd only have, a few months to, there's no transition strategy there.
How much, you still have 2 years?
Yeah.
So another year or 2?
This year and one more.
Is that the same thing?
Yeah.
Happy New Year.
Look in the audience.
How you been?
We're on the same.
Everywhere.
Yeah.
That's good.
Because I can remember, I thought it was, I almost thought it was Shannon.
All right.
It's
So,
Michael.
Yeah.
young lady, how are you? Welcome
See
to
you for quite a
2017.
while.
No, I really wanted to be at this meeting, but
Oh, I missed it too, as it turned out. So
let
that's
me
why it's
play
been a
that.
long time.
You missed a good White Elephant gift exchange.
I never did hear how that went.
It turned out well.
I even had a pretty.
Did you watch that
Yeah.
movie?
You were headed someplace wild.
The Christmas Story?
Yes, and I plan to do it again.
Oh,
With Ralphie? You gonna shoot your eye out? You never did watch that one? Oh, that's a good one.
Well, I get those Christmas movies. What's it about?
That was the one you got upstairs. That's a little boy and it's narrated kind of firsthand. He grew up in the 50s in Ohio and just Christmas. He wants to be again.
More attention to that stuff.
Did all the playing in the pool and all that.
You know what's really sad about that movie, John?
What's that?
What's really sad about that movie is I identify more with that hero than I do with this one.
Yeah, that house was up for sale a couple years ago. It's actually up in my father's hometown in Ohio. And somebody bought it, made a little museum and gift store out of it.
Oh,
So you can go there and buy.
Well, when you come to our house, you'll see a leg lamp.
You got one? I got a mini leg lamp.
My wife said she wanted one, and I thought she was going to keep it out at Christmas. But no, it's out all year.
No, I'm gonna read it. Read it back.
No, I'll read it, but you want me to sign it?
Oh, you can do that. Yeah, you can.
Probably should have printed out the tree.
No, that I have one.
Yeah, I'll come over there.
So they're trying to go
That's good to have.
technological.
Probably come up to here, probably come up to here since that's where the camera is.
No, that's okay. We can go off camera.
I like.
The camera's already rolling.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
And you-
But you're not,
and you shine it.
you're not really getting around
So is the
anything. You
microphone.
still have to do the official part here.
Okay, I would like to call this meeting to order. Would you all stand for the pledge of allegiance? I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay. First of all, I'd like to just state that welcome you all, and please remember that this board appreciates participation from the public. If you have any comments throughout the board meeting or work session, please stand, state your name and address, and your comments will be heard. I guess I was supposed to do. I was gonna swear in the new commissioner, but, so I guess I swear him in and then do the roll call, I guess so, huh?
You're fine.
Either way, you're flexible.
You're doing,
I'm glad to
you're
know that.
opening the meeting and you're doing the roll call, and
All right.
then he's not quite a member yet, so. But I've got it.
So we have a new board member here, Vince Bakke, if you haven't met. Vince, probably most everybody has, so. We have an oath here, so if you would repeat after me, I would appreciate it. I, Vincent R. Bakke,
I, Vincent R. Bakke,
do solemnly swear
do solemnly swear
and affirm that I will support,
and affirm that I will support,
protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States
protect, and defend the Constitution of the United States,
and Constitution of the State of Montana,
the Constitution of the State of Montana,
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
and that I will discharge the duties of my office
of Commissioner in and for the Great Falls International Airport Authority
of Commissioner in and for the Great Falls Airport Authority
of Great Falls, Montana with fidelity.
Great Falls, Montana with fidelity.
Welcome to the board. All right.
Sounds a whole lot like the oath in the Air Force.
What do we got? I need to sign it first. Okay, now we'll do the roll call. What's Commissioner Baki?
Here.
Here. Oh, Commissioner Buck?
Here.
Commissioner Hovind?
Here.
Commissioner Rooney?
Here.
Commissioner Swenson is not here at this time. Commissioner Evans?
Here.
And Commissioner Talcott's here. Okay, so, next item on the agenda is consent agenda. The consent agenda is made up of routine day-to-day items that require board action, but do not appear to have a significant public impact. Items may be pulled from the consent agenda for separate discussion or vote by any board member. This agenda consists of the approval of the board meeting minutes from November 22nd, 2016, payroll checks totaling from November $78,159.56, and December totaling $120,024.47. Maintenance operation checks for November 7/6/6 to 8/24 totaling $119,788.73, and December checks 8/25 to 9/01 totaling $3,443,794.09. Also includes the approval of passenger facility charge totaling for November $30,000 and December $65,000, and the financial reports for November and December. Is there a motion concerning the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second the motion.
Any questions or comments? If not, all those in favor of approving the consent agenda signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Okay, director's report.
Yes, I'll jump right into it. Thanks everybody for showing up again in 2017. If you've been reading the weekly reports, we're preparing for our airline meetings. Right now, the airline conferences start fairly early this year, right around Valentine's Day is the first conference. And we'll be attending at least 2 this year. The one in February to kind of get an idea how the summer's shaping up and how last year ended. And then we'll be looking to go see Allegiant this year, which we didn't attend their conference last year. So they have their own conference, so they typically don't accept meetings at the other conferences except new airports. So we'll definitely attend those 2. In preparation for the meetings, we're in the process of developing all of our data for the presentations this year. And one of the interesting data points that has kind of come up out of the early analysis is we had a retention study done. Our consultant offered to do one. They had done one for several years ago, and they've updated that. The last one was done, I believe, in 2010. And our retention rate has actually jumped up to 79% of our trade area. If you look at our trade area, it goes all the way out to Lewistown, north to the border, and then east all the way to the Front Range. So some of those cross over other trade areas. You can imagine Helena. Obviously, some of our 90-minute drive time goes well beyond their trade area. So there's an overlap there. But in those zip codes that we compete in, right now we're retaining about 79% of the traffic. That was 52% when we looked at it several years ago. So with the lower fares that we've seen, indeed we are capturing more of our traffic. So we thought that's really encouraging. As soon as that study is completed, we found some typos in the initial draft. We'll send that out to everybody to read it. There's some excellent data in there comparing us to some of the other airports in the state, both by fare, by retention rate, and really providing some really good detailed information on average fares in comparison to some of the other airports. So I think that'd be a great study to review. So we'll get that out to you as soon as we can get it finalized. Like I said, we've got meetings coming up in a couple of weeks. Now we kind of kick off our airline year. There's usually some really interesting discussions that come out of those. We kind of see what the future routes are that the airlines are interested in. We continue to work with them on routes that we've been talking about in the past. Obviously, Chicago service is expanding, and we'll get an update on how ticket sales are going on that. In addition, Delta is moving their service over to mainline aircraft starting this summer to Minneapolis, so we'll have an Airbus on our route. I think it's probably the first time in about 10 years that we've had mainline Delta. So that's really encouraging, and it will be a very nice plane to fly. So we'll have some discussions on that also while we're down there. But it's a real important part of our year when we get to sit down with our primary business partners and see what's on their minds. So I'm looking forward to that. Taxiway A4B4, I've got this drawing here that I had put up. If you've been following the weekly reports, we're still in fairly intensive discussions with FAA with regard to the alignment. Hey, Mike. So I know this is kind of hard to see, but 1634 now 1735 crosses here. You see, it's about a 40-degree angle, runway 321. In the past year or so, FAA has adopted new design guidance where they want all of the intersections of runways and taxiways to be at 90 degrees. Well, when you're trying to reach something that's at a 40-degree angle, even though I wasn't that great in geometry, it's going to be hard to get there with 90-degree turns. It's almost like that three guys in a rowboat and how you get everybody across, you know. We're kind of in that same situation down here in these intersections. We can get 90 to come across 321, but then to try and get 90 back into 1634, because that space is very tight, there's not a lot of maneuvering room that the aircraft has in order to get into a 90. You can see what they've done over here. In the old days, you would have crossed with taxiway B, would have went straight. And it would have been a priority to keep that traffic straight because the average pilot's expecting to go straight, and you have hold bars, signs, and everything else to tell him to stop before he crosses a runway. In the FAA's new vernacular, that's not enough. They want to make sure that every intersection is at 90 degrees so that when the pilot pulls up, they can see either way. We've pointed out that both sides of this runway are never going to be in operation at the same time because it's a crosswind runway. The whole reason you're going over there is because the wind is crossing the main runway. And so when that wind is strong enough to make you do that in excess of 15 knots, or some of the pilots are a little more sensitive to it, some are less sensitive. When they go over here, they're going to want to be in the prevailing wind for both takeoff and landing. So if you're holding here to try and get on 3-4, the traffic that you're primarily concerned with is whatever's landing coming this way. Because that's the plane you're going to have a conflict with. If you happen to get on the runway while this guy's still taking off, there's not likely to be a major problem. I mean, there's a paperwork incursion there, but it's not a major infraction of any kind. So, we've tried to come up with some solutions down here. We've suggested a number of things, backing up the hold line so that you can't even get on to this runway end until you're cleared by the tower. FAA's response to that is, well, you may not always have a 24-hour tower. Okay. It's going to be a lot of difficulty to try and get this maneuvering pattern into a 90-degree angle. And so that's the primary problem we're having right now. Just even this week, we sent them a couple other potential solutions that we think may have some merit to them to try and deal with that. We'll have to see what the FAA comes back with. The problem is, we should be designing right now in order to hit a advertised date this spring. So every day that we lose in the FAA trying to decide what to do with this intersection is a day that the schedule gets much tighter. So we continue to have these discussions. I'm hopeful that we'll get something resolved. Obviously, in my opinion, what the FAA has proposed doesn't make sense. As I said in the report, what they would like to do is come up here and move this intersection up. The problem with that is now you've got 100 feet of pavement that's actually behind the pilot. It's not even what we would call paperwork shortening, where you have safety area on the other end that isn't technically part of your runway, but if you happen to get on that runway and you can't take off, you have room to slow down, this pavement's actually behind you. So it's really a shortening of 100 feet. And you guys probably remember, or at least most of you do, the discussions we had last year about trying to maintain 6,000 feet of runway there. The CRJ, particularly the 200, but even the 700s and 900s, 6,000 feet is a critical runway length, particularly in warmer weather. That airplane will have to take severe weight penalties in order to take off in the summertime if we can't preserve 6,000 feet. And even with 6,000 feet, during very hot days, you're going to have to take a weight penalty. So we don't want to shorten that runway any. We paid quite a bit of money to retain the width so the majority of our fleet can use it. And we've pointed out to the FAA that being in a 10-degree slant towards approaching traffic seems like a lot safer situation than shortening a runway, in any scenario. So we're waiting to see what the FAA will determine. There's a chance that they may end up delaying the project by a year or two while they try to decide this, really what should be a fairly easy decision. So we've been in contact with Senator Daines' office, and they have a pretty good relationship with Senator Thune, who's on the aviation subcommittee. And we've pointed out that if we do what we've been asked to do, which is shorten the runway by 100 feet, in addition to that, we will literally throw away somewhere in the neighborhood of $750,000 worth of work that was put in the ground last year. And so I think at some point we have to realize that not every problem can be solved and move forward with something that would have been perfectly acceptable 2 years ago. In fact, it was perfectly acceptable 2 years ago when we initially designed this intersection. Did you have a question?
May I point
Sure.
your attention?
Absolutely.
It would take some more concrete, John. If we were to simply fill in this infield here, concrete, then you could paint lines to create a 9-degree intersection, but you would also have tarmac there on which they could maneuver for full length once they had cleared
Right,
it.
so you could have them ask for full length.
You bet.
The main objection the FAA, we suggested something similar to that, is they don't like what they call an expansive pavement now. Because where the pilot will get out there and not know exactly what they're supposed to do. But I suggested we even break the intersection in two, and you would have one alignment which would come down here just for this, and you would back it up so that there's more radius in there. The other problem we've got is we're right on the critical area of the main runway, which would be an issue, except for that the critical area that we're on is only when we're in ILS conditions. Well, when we're in ILS conditions, you can't use runway 16 because there aren't any approaches to it.
Well, I would submit to them that this pavement here, I really only have two choices. I could either try to take off that direction, which would be obviously the wrong thing to do, or I can take off that direction. It's not as if I can wander onto some other taxiway or runway and take off in the wrong direction. Particularly, pilots kind of cue on painted lines
Right.
and lights and things like that, so
Well,
I think that would solve the problem. You'd have a 90-degree turn on for anybody who could take the intersection departure, or they could go full length, and they'd have plenty of room to maneuver to do it.
yeah, and that is, we've suggested something similar to that by breaking it in two, and we've actually given them about 4 options we think are feasible. And hopefully we'll be able to move that forward into some kind of decision. And in fact, even just, I think it was 2 days ago, I sent them a aerial photo of O'Hare, and they've spent, I think it was, do you remember what that number was, 8 billion? I mean, a ridiculous amount of money to clean up their intersections at O'Hare, and yet there's 4 or 5 of them that are at 90 degrees that you can see immediately when you pull up the drawing. If you look careful, there's probably a dozen or more that aren't at 90.
And there are entire intersections that can't be used by large airplanes because of danger of striking other airplanes. So anyway, it's a different standard.
What's the finished width of 1735?
The width,
Yeah.
it'll be 150 feet.
Okay.
Yeah, so we were able to maintain 150, but we had to pay for the outer 25 feet because the FAA, according to their design criteria, we were only eligible for 100 feet. So the last year, we made the decision to keep it at 150, and the main reason for that is when we have, even this summer, when we do construction to tie in, we're going to have 321 down. That leaves us completely inoperable for FedEx and some of the other guys, whereas if we can keep 150 feet, and the Airbuses that Delta will have, the 757 that FedEx flies, those guys will be able to use it. Maybe not at full weight, but at least they'll still be in operation.
Aren't nearly every community airport our size facing a similar problem? Nearly everybody has a crosswind runway that comes in at an intersection.
And
Not
we,
90 normally.
yeah. Yeah, well, if you, right, so like, it just depends on where you are in the country, and, you know, like Seattle, for example, the winds prevail north-south and they flip, but there's not enough of a crosswind component that they have a crosswind. So depending on where you are, you know, Denver doesn't have very much crosswind capacity. You know, the winds will flip, but they're primarily one direction. So a lot of airports, though, and you know, of the 400 commercial service airports, I'd say at least a quarter of them, if not more, have crosswind runways, particularly in the Midwest, where the winds can come out of practically any angle.
And especially in the south, a lot of municipal airports of today are former Army Air Corps training fields of yesterday,
So they have triangle.
which were intentionally built in a triangle
Yep.
for crosswinds.
I see.
So there are a lot of examples out there that have this same kind of configuration. I don't know why all of a sudden it's a problem.
Right, and not all of them can be fixed. I mean, it's like anything else. I mean, you know, rules are rules, but, you know, they don't always apply, and that's, you know, this is a great instance of why. I mean, the angle is just too tight, there's too much going on in there to make all 90-degree turns. And some of it, you can see what's happened here. I mean, this is really an odd alignment, where now, you know, as a pilot, if you're coming down B, you're gonna take this hard left, and then a hard right in order to get to the runway crossing to go across, and then it doesn't even line up quite right.
Except on a snow day, in which case I'm.
Well, then you're gonna have no idea where you're going. And we pointed that out.
Into the
too.
grass.
Yeah, exactly.
What's that sound?
The unfortunate thing is, someone made the decision that they wanted everything to be at 90 degrees. And so that's evidently the policy and the stance they're taking. And to deviate from that, someone's gonna have to stick their neck out about that much for something that makes total common sense. And it's kinda hard sometimes to.
There are a lot of things you can do, though.
How far down do they want to displace the new taxiway? Just 100 feet?
Which, you're talking about taxiway C?
Yeah, to make the 90-degree on 3 on.
Oh, 110 feet.
Okay. Because realistically, we do this in LA all the time, is you've got one taxiway, and then you've got a shortened taxiway that 99% of the time you can use unless you're at a certain weight.
Right.
And if the taxi or the runway width is great enough, or we put a turnaround at the end, to prevent delaying the project and allow them to continue to pay for it, the RJs, most of the time, could accept that 5,900 feet for, you know, except for on the hottest days to get out of here, especially if they have a wind or if the other one's closed. But if in that specific day on that specific temperature, they need full length, they come out, they turn left, then they turn around at full length, and they take off from full length. So,
And I think that's the other option would be a bunch of turnarounds. I mean, operationally, it's,
and we do that all
Yeah.
the time at small airports in the islands, is you go down and turn around, you taxi back to the full length, turn around and take off.
and, you know, I mean, I think the problem is, you know, we may end up with a 757 down there that needs full length. I mean, that's, you know.
Well, and 100 feet's not gonna make that big a difference for him. If he can't take
Hopefully
off
not.
at 5,900 feet, I guarantee he probably can't take off at 6,000.
Yeah, yeah. But that's, you know, kind of where we are with that project, and hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll, you know, meet some type of threshold for a decision and be able to move the project forward. There is, I think at this point, a pretty decent chance that they won't be able to make a decision at all in the time frame to get a project done this year. So we'll continue to push and see if we can get a decision made, and if not, then we've been talking about potentially trying to escalate a different project forward to fill in the funding gap. So we'll still have about $1.5 million that'll come to us this year for entitlements, and obviously we want to get something done with that. So
So just out of curiosity, if that can't get designed this year, what engineering contract will that be designed with?
that's one of the problems we have too, is our engineering contract is expiring, and you may remember the reason we're delayed in selecting the engineer is because the FAA wants you to have your master plan done and have that out and published for a few months before you can go out and select a new engineer. The problem with that is, and you know, Fred could probably tell you better than anyone, sometimes master plans take 5 years, sometimes they take 10 years. You know, and so, you know, this is another great example of something that looks good on paper, but then when you issue it as a rule and say you have to do it this way, we ended up delaying our engineering selection by over a year already. So, that'll be yet another problem is, we should be switching engineers, but that switch won't even happen until April, most likely when we complete the selection. In other news, we've been in contact with the folks that brought the Bravo 369 show out, and they continue to be interested in moving an airplane up here. Most recently, they've been talking to a museum that has a P-39 that's not in flying condition, and they've asked if there's any hangars in Great Falls that they could potentially house that in while they construct a permanent museum facility up here. So we've kind of got the feelers out right now looking for someone that might be able to house that. It's not a particularly large plane, P-39. It's fairly short because it's a fighter, and the wing base is pretty short too. We've offered potentially trying to rig something up in the second alert hangar that's over there without a front to it. We've talked to them about maybe the upper shop because it can't be flown. It'll have to be trucked here, which means the wings will be off. So maybe the remnant pieces of the upper shop might work after the area that's leased, and a few other options too that we've tried to come up with to get that plane out here. I think if we can get the plane out here, it increases the chances the museum would come eventually pretty dramatically. They'd be doing a lot of their fundraising out of here and trying to get that airplane airworthy. I think right now there are only 2 in the country that fly. In fact, 2 in the world that fly. And this would aim to be the 3rd flying P-39 out there. So pretty exciting. And we'll continue to work with those guys on that project. And then lastly, I was going to mention December activity was down about 12%, pretty sizable decline. We monitored throughout the year declines generally in the 2% to 3% range throughout the spring. As we got into summer, things leveled off and we were pretty much break even throughout the summer with the tourism traffic coming in. And then as you got into the fourth quarter is dramatically down, 8%, and then 12%. I think December, part of the reason for the increase in declines, a lot of people stayed into January. So when we get the January numbers, we should see some balancing of that. With the holiday this year being the holiday was actually on Monday, I think a lot of people took that rest of that week off. So we should see some January bounce. In addition, last year we had just about, I think it was 750 passengers that were diverted here, which was about 3% of our activity for the month. That was that large Bozeman-Billings storm last year that diverted a lot of airplanes here, so we ended up with a sizable bump from that. But taking away that 3% leaves it right in that 8% range. So it'll be interesting as we get into the start of the year to see how activity comes back. I think there was quite a bit of anticipation of the election. I think things were economically a little bit quieter in the fourth quarter than even now. Some of the data that's coming out shows a slump in the fourth quarter. But we'll have to see how it rebounds in the first part of the year to see if activity starts coming back as we get January numbers. But I did want to mention that because it is one of the sharper declines we've seen, particularly a quarterly decline in 6-7 years. So it's back to the recession since we've had a quarter down that far. So,
is there any inclination that maybe because of the Canadian dollar being and the Canadians coming across?
Everything we see doesn't support that. From talking to Allegiant, December traffic was about 90% Canadian, which is pretty typical. And interestingly, what we've been tracking now since last summer is a huge decline in short-term parking transactions, and about 20% per month. The short-term parking transactions are generally emblematic of the most leisure traffic at your airport because they're the drop-offs and pickups. So that's the folks that don't want to pay to park. Somebody's running them up here and that type of thing. And so that traffic has declined the most, and it's typically the most economically sensitive leisure traffic that it generates pickups and drop-offs. So that generally means it's tied to a local economic condition. And that's all I've got.
That's all you've got? Okay. First item on our agenda is the annual duty of electing new officers. And so at this time, we are looking for a chair and vice chair. And, the floor is open to nominations and/or discussion.
I'd like to nominate you, Brad, for a 10-year role as president or chairman.
Continue on the tradition.
He doesn't listen very well, does he?
Is that the process I've forgotten since last year? It is nomination of officers, and then it's a vote?
Mm-hmm. Is there any discussion? As there isn't a second, there wasn't a second, was there?
No.
I'll second it. All that means is you lose the floor, you can still decline if you. so
I have a
choose.
question.
Yeah.
With our
Okay, it's been
changes,
moved
are
and
there any unfilled committee or other responsibility positions at this time that we need to fill?
Oh, I'm sure there are.
Yeah, later in the agenda, we'll be asking if anyone else wants to sit in on the engineering selection. Right now, Brad had mentioned he was interested, but that was a year ago, I think, when we started trying to get a selection done.
Is there any discussion? I guess the only discussion would be, I don't know how many years, it's either been 2 or 3.
Apparently, per the record keeper, it's been 3.
Oh,
And
per the
I
record
am
keeper.
willing to serve in one of the capacities.
Yeah, and I think it'd be appropriate for, there has been some discussion, more typically, the vice chair is in that position for some period of time and moves up, and Deb decided at some point that she wasn't able to do that, so it wasn't really by choice that I took that 3rd term. But at this point, I think Deb's situation is to the point where she's willing to, to take that spot. And so I think it would be more appropriate for someone else to be in this position. I would be happy to. I'd be just fine if you voted that motion down.
Are you nominating Deb then?
I can't do that right now. The motion on the floor is me. We will move to that, but the discussion has been that she, if the vote went that way, which we expect it will, then she would accept it, so, yes. And I would be happy to nominate Deb once this motion gets off the floor.
Well, or not. That's just.
Any other discussion? All those in favor of the motion of me remaining as chair, signify by saying aye.
Well, I'm gonna say aye.
Okay. You can go against your own motion, that's okay. All those opposed,
Well, that was.
same sign?
Aye.
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 Well,
Okay.
I was trying to get some.
Yeah, you got it
I've never
going.
seen
Yes, we
something
got the
not
discussion
work.
going, that's what we needed to do. Now, is there a motion, another motion at this time?
I would move to nominate Deb for the chair of the board.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
It's been moved and seconded. Is there any discussion? Further discussion or question?
Oh, I missed the first deal. But that's all right, I guess. If we should
It's a
vote.
fast-moving ballgame.
I
If you're gonna
guess,
be
I
chairman, you
guess,
gotta
don't
be-
blink.
You missed what?
What happened to the motion of you? Oh,
It was
so
voted
one
against.
person oh.
Sean is the only one, he had to follow up his motion in the first place, felt obligated, but he was the only one. So it went down
Oh,
In flames.
In flames, yeah.
Flames.
Yeah, 5-1.
I
So
was still
now,
pondering.
I suppose the discussion is it true that she'd be willing to consider it?
It is true.
it is true.
Oh,
Any further discussion or question?
good question.
All those in favor of the motion of Deb as being the chair, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Perfect. How about vice chair? Are there any nominations for vice chair?
Yes, I would nominate Dan for the vice chair. He too has expressed a willingness after last year.
Motion is all you get right
I'm
now.
sorry.
Is there a second? You'll have your
Sorry,
time.
yes, I'll have my time.
Is there a second?
I would second Dan. nominate.
it's been moved and seconded that Dan will, as, for the position of vice chair. Is there any discussion or questions?
You can ask him that question.
I offered that I would be willing to serve in one of the roles.
And
Yes,
that still obtains.
I am a willing participant.
Any other questions or comments? All right, all those in favor of Dan Rooney as for vice chair signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? Thank you very much. We'll
Congratulations.
switch, yeah, congratulations, and I'd be glad to move down the road here.
To the end of the table.
Well, yeah, to one of those chairs back there, I would love to do that.
Toward that end of the table.
You guys can move over and I'll just move that. You've got a big stack.
Well, that didn't take long, Deb.
You need to actually give me the agenda though.
Oh, you have an agenda? You don't have an agenda?
I decided to be
gonna
electronic
do it
this
from there?
time,
All right, I'll see.
which wasn't a
There you
good
go.
call apparently.
I'll stay right here. Oh, I gotta move my hat and everything. Don't want my hat?
No.
Kinda goes with it.
No, thanks.
That comes with the
All right.
Thank you.
Where's Dick when all this is going on? That's what I want to know.
Congratulations.
Thank
That's a
you.
faster transition of power than Trump.
Well, I haven't started yet.
Here we go.
Yeah, here you
Here we
go.
go.
Hold on.
Okay, well, I'll forego the traditional acceptance speech. Let's see here. Okay.
Madam
well,
Chairwoman, may I begin with a motion?
well,
Thank the former chairman for his stalwart and excellent service.
Thank you.
I would second the
I was
motion.
gonna say, I think we need that second. Discussion? I would like to add my thanks to Brad for steering the ship. I actually thought it was 2 years, so 3?
Too long,
3.
too long.
Any
Thank you.
other? Hmm?
Thank you.
Well done.
All right.
Can we have that in the minutes, Laura?
Got it.
Got it?
Not, I don't have it as a motion. I just have thank you to Brad for his
Right.
service. Okay.
Okay.
As a motion, we would have to vote on, wouldn't we? I mean, we have to vote whether or not we want to
Yeah,
issue the compliment or not.
All right.
So someone might say no.
Right, I know, we don't want to go.
So I withdraw the motion.
Thank you. Thank you,
Move on.
Mr. Buck. Thank you for that. Okay, now, the next order of business is the acceptance of the final audit. And I
Oh.
believe,
Oh, go ahead.
is that not correct?
Yeah.
Oh, and I believe we have 2 representatives here from JCC, or excuse me, AZ.
Oh my God.
Sorry. I was talking to JCCS people today, that's my apology. From AZ Company, and would you like to step up and introduce yourselves?
Yeah, actually, thank you all. I'm Rick Reisig. Many of you know me, and of course Megan Connors. Annette Hill, who's the partner in charge of the audit, had a scheduling issue, couldn't make it. Megan's battling a sinus infection, so I'm here too, to help wherever. And certainly could talk about just some brief items in the audit report package if you want, or we can just be here to
Here for
answer any
questions.
questions you may have.
Okay.
So whatever you choose to do.
Okay.
And we've got the audit
Yep,
committee
I was
too,
just
if they'd like to
gonna
offer any comments. I would just, I would draw your attention to page 7. That gives a nice, quick summary of the year's financials. And as we've said it in previous meetings, it was practically a carbon copy of the prior year. Operating revenues were down, I think, about 10,000, and operating expenses about the same amount. So it was a very similar year to the prior year. Not a whole lot of difference in there. And I don't know if the audit committee, if you'd like to just comment on our meeting at all, or on the audit.
I think only that, this is my second year on the audit committee, and again, from the first year to the second year, both you and Maria always have a command of what's going on with the budget, with the financial statements, and the audit process itself. It's always very well understood, very clean, and I think you two particularly do a very good job, and the rest of your staff as well. Despite there being a couple of points that were debated both last year and this year, I think it's a very good audit, and I think it speaks very highly of both of you and the job that you do.
Anyone else from the committee?
I
Thoughts?
concur with Dan said. He's much more eloquent than I.
Okay. So we're through the process then. So can I ask for a motion from the finance committee then to accept it?
I'll move that we accept the audit as written.
Okay. Does that need a second? I can't remember from
From a
committee.
committee, I don't think we've got it written to where the committees can,
Oh,
does the committee recommendation need a second?
Right.
no, they're recommending, it,
Oh,
but,
okay.
I mean, we still have a first and a second just to, as the board to approve.
Okay.
So it does
So
need a
if-
second.
So if he's recommending it and saying he makes the motion for you guys to approve it, then we still need the
Just need
second.
a second, okay.
Well, I will second it.
You'll second it? Okay. There's been a motion from the floor to accept the final 2015-16 audit as presented. Any discussion?
I would just have one question. I mean, there's that, with the retirement portion of this, what is, I looked at the numbers, I tried to understand it. Is there a liability or is it just something you have to note?
Of what number?
The
PERS.
liability.
Pensions.
Yeah.
Yeah, with the pension.
It really is a liability, but will it ever be paid? Quite likely not. You know, every local government is, well, every government, not only just local government, but state government too, is in the same boat. And depending on whether that liability is ever funded or not, it remains to be seen, and it could be, you know, subject to a law change too. You know, I know in the last legislative session, there was a bill to adjust the way PERS and TRS were really calculated, and changing it from a defined benefit to a defined contribution plan. So as of right now, it is a real liability. Going into the future, will it ever be paid? It remains to be seen, and for some entities, certainly not. You know, I know some states are funding that, but their structure and how they're calculating their liabilities are different.
But it's just showed up in the last couple of years, right?
Yep.
So it's a gap thing? I mean,
Yep, exactly right. It's an accounting standard thing, so.
Okay.
Without offering an expert opinion, the probability that would have to be paid off, I think, is very small,
Yeah,
extremely small.
because no local, because just think of it just with what you guys have yourself, and then you just locally, you add in the city of Great Falls, Cascade County, school district, where will that funding come from to meet that liability? It's not likely.
Good
Okay.
question.
Thank
And
you.
that's fully implemented now, right?
Mhm.
Okay. Any other questions? I have one question, I think, well, either after the vote or right now. I think you generally also speak to things coming up for the next year. Would there be anything to share on that?
There's really nothing like, you know, this year, there was 2 pronouncements that you guys implemented from an accounting standpoint. The biggest one was just the reporting of your investments, the fair value of investments. That was a big one that had been lurking for a couple of years. For next year, for you guys, there isn't, meaning airports, there isn't anything that's real significant. For other local governments, there is, starting in June 30, 2017 year. But from an airport reporting standpoint, not so much, not like the ERS liability issue or even the fair value of instrument issue.
Right. Okay.
I'm sorry, what was the last one? I missed.
That fair value of instruments.
Oh, yeah, the parking contract and
Yep.
that affected us a couple of years ago, yeah.
You know, I will say this, interestingly enough, and not to get too far into it, but from a for-profit entity standpoint, there's a movement to change how, like, it used to be Republic Parking, but I know it's a different vendor.
No, it's still Republic. They
Still
were
Republic.
purchased, though.
Okay, so there's a standard now that's being debated on how they might handle their side of that transaction. Which, could it eventually affect how you guys handle that side of the transaction? I think it might, just because it's, if the accounting changes force Republic to do what they're being proposed to do now, it would not be consistent with how you guys are required to handle that part of the transaction.
2 more years.
now, so it'll likely affect you at some point in the future, but not next year.
That's good news, right, Maria? Any questions? Okay, well, there's a motion on the floor then to accept the audit. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
All opposed, same sign. Okay, thank you. The audit is
Thank you.
accepted.
Thank you, guys.
And thank you for coming. The next item on the agenda is the upper shop vehicle storage lease.
Yes, and I'll turn it over to Laura to present this, but I did want to just remind everybody of the history. So several years back, we built the SRE building. We moved the majority of our snow fleet down to the SRE building, which is down near Front Range Aviation. In order to get down there with utilities, about half that contract ended up being utility and site work to get the utilities a quarter mile down there. And so we had to cut back on the days we would have liked to have had in that building. So we always knew we were going to have to expand. In that interim period, we've had some of our snow equipment in the old lower shop and then a little bit over in the upper shop right next to it, which are the 2 buildings we used to be in exclusively. And so we've had some discussions over the last couple of years with AvMax about that upper shop. Ideally, we would like to hang on to some of those bays for a few more years. We have our sand stored in there, and we don't have a real good place right now to put the sand. And we have a little bit of equipment over there too. And so we've been looking for potentially some type of tenant that might want part of that building but not the whole building. And that's kind of where we've arrived at today with this proposal. So I'll turn that over to Laura to present.
Right, and most of the people that are coming to us only want part of the building. But if someone did come and they wanted the entire building for full price, Rod has said that he can vacate the building. I don't know if his guys agree with him, but. So we've had this advertised since early 2015, and surprisingly enough, every few months we get somebody coming to us interested in it, and some very interesting ones. I put some of it in this report here, where we've had a gymnastics club and car rental company that actually wanted that to be the face. They hope to get into the building, but in the interim, they were thinking that would be a good spot. Storage, some maintenance, just different things, but we just haven't been able to bring one forward. So this gentleman actually has 2 buses and a limousine and runs a commercial business here in town. And you've probably seen him out and about, or seen his vehicles out and about. And so he's been at Gusto Distributing, but that whole building is being taken by another company. So he's getting booted from that space. So it was kind of a quick thing that he needed to find some space. And so he came and looked up here, thought part of the upper shop, just the long bay that we have in there, was perfect. And it is pretty perfect as far as what the size is of that bay. So he was paying $100 per car down there, kind of how it broke up. And so we had it listed for $6.36 a square foot annually, plus the cost of utilities. And that was just too much for what he was going to be able to do to bump it up that much. So we worked on it, and we were able to, basically we doubled his cost. We went to, it's around $200 a car per month, but we looked at it more at the annual square footage. So we're at $4.74 square foot annually, or $600 per month. And then we still have quite a bit of equipment in there, and we're in and out of there, and we will be in and out of there more than, well, he does it more on the weekends, but then obviously when we have the snow and the different things and we need our equipment. So the utilities stay in our name. So we will be responsible for those utilities, which we originally had it listed that the utilities would have to be paid for by the leasee.
One thing I'd note too is it's on the same meter as our lower shop. So we would have to pay, we don't know what the cost was to separate.
About 3,000.
About $3,000 to segregate the meters, which will make sense when we're out of there completely and we're looking for a tenant for the whole thing. But for the time being, it doesn't make sense to spend the $3,000, I don't think now. We can just keep it on the current utility bill.
So we figured it's better to get something out of that space than nothing out of that space. And we were very clear with him that especially when that equipment is able to move down to the snow, to our new snow building, and we don't need to have any of our equipment in there anymore, that we would prefer to lease the whole building. So he knows that if somebody comes along that has a need for the whole building, that we would need to probably terminate his lease and move forward, and he's all right with that. We have a 90-day termination in there. So what we're looking for today is to go ahead and enter into a lease with him. It would be for a year with that 90-day termination, and we would extend it for additional years, just go year to year after that, again, keeping that termination in there. It will bring in an additional $7,200 revenue, and that's what we'd recommend.
How many square feet is the building?
The whole building is like 5,000.
It's almost 6. isn't it?
Six, closer to 6?
It's 58 something.
58.
Yeah. And it's a cinder block building. It's actually a really nice building, and that's, you may recall, we received an appraisal on it, and then AvMax was interested in it, but about 20% off appraised value. So at the time, we said we'd rather retain that because we have some metal buildings that are on bare ground across the airport that we're storing some of our long-term storage stuff in. And I'd rather be in that building and get rid of the metal buildings in the long term than have to replace the metal buildings out there and incur that cost. So, in the long term, I think, we'll eventually have need for this building again, but over the next few years, once we get out of that, I think there's an opportunity to lease this building for 5, 6, maybe even 10 years while we stay in those warehouses across the airfield.
He'll be using just under, about 1,700 square feet or so.
Yeah, he's using one straight-through bay. It's almost a quarter of the building. There's 2 straight-through bays, and there's some small bays in there where there's enclosures. I don't know why it was built that way.
Yeah, it's not set up real good.
It's not. That's one of the reasons we move most of our equipment out of there.
So would his occupancy preclude any use of the other part of the space?
No.
Okay, so somebody else with cars could park in another bay?
Yeah, or, right now, we'll keep parking equipment in there for the time being, but once we move out, we could have 2 tenants in there. As I said earlier on, I don't know how Rod feels about it, but, should that P39 come, if they really needed a place to store that, and it was the difference in getting us, a development down in the GA area, we'd probably try to accommodate that in the remainder of the building until the museum structure is built. It's kind of, frankly, it's our one sort of slot that, in the puzzle that we can move things around to right now. Once that building's gone, we're going to be short of roof space.
It's just got just non-critical stuff in it. It's not where we keep the snow plow that we need to jump on right away.
Is there access inside the perimeter fence through that building?
Yes, and so all of his guys are going to have to be badged.
Yes.
In the future, we can easily fence it out, but much like the meter cost, at this point, it doesn't seem to make sense to incur money for a temporary use. When we have a long-term user for that, we can move the fence and segregate the electric and make those improvements then.
Any idea how many people we're talking about?
I think he has 3.
There's a total of 5.
Those are
He has
5.
4 employees.
Laura,
Ken does a good security, because that
Full
to me would
FBI
be a
check.
significant weak spot then if you had
Yep,
a bus company coming in and out of there.
yep. He'll get a full FBI check, just like anyone else that has AOA access.
That would be
And
my own.
I think they have CDLs anyway, so there's a good chance they'll pass it. Sometimes people don't pass it.
Laura, what was the stopping points for some of the other interests then? The price, the configuration?
A little bit of everything. The gymnastics club, they wanted a couple-year fix, and what they saw is more of the improvements were gonna be too expensive to make it, because they would wanna make it a long-term then if they were gonna do that. The car rental one is not dead. I'm still talking to him, and in fact, that would still work with what's going on in the other bay, and even if we had the airplane in there as well, we could still do that. So, you know, some of these, they just come back every maybe half a year or two, they come back and they talk to you, and they're just keeping their options open, so.
So then he just insures his vehicles. That's
Yeah,
it.
we've already checked that through with
Okay.
Nick, that, you know, any property damage he causes with, you know, hitting something with the vehicle would be covered. And I think he carries $1 million because of the liability in his
He
business
does.
already, so.
And it's above what he needs to cover.
Yeah.
Will this establish a new lease rate for anybody else who's interested in using that property?
I'd say it's a temporary use. I mean, you know, certainly, you know, the flex, we're benefiting from the flexibility this tenant allows us to have. We can keep the sand in there, we can keep our snow equipment in the other bays, and we could potentially even move that airplane in there. You know, again, if that airplane happened to move in there, you know, they're probably not gonna wanna pay, you know, $6, $7 per square foot either. I mean, you know, we'd probably have to look at what's fair for that. So I'd say, you know, these temporary uses, in my opinion, don't establish new rental rates. It's just a use of convenience. It's an income stream and accommodates an operation temporarily until we use that building for an ultimate future tenant.
So if someone wanted to build a bowling alley that lasted 20 years, then we'd be looking at a different rate.
Right,
Okay.
yeah. Yeah, and that's, you know, he's got 90-day cancellation. He's not making any improvements. It's fairly easy to move him out of there if we have a better use.
Can that 90 days be exercised by either party?
I think he can,
Yes.
yeah.
Okay.
Any other questions? Looking for a motion then, on the staff recommendation.
I move we approve the recommendation of staff.
I second.
Any questions, comments? All those in favor of the staff recommendation on the lease, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, motion passes.
Laura, what's the name of the company?
Blacked out 406 limo.
There you go.
That doesn't sound suspicious.
I was thinking the same thing.
And the next item is the outdoor art RFP recommendation.
Yes, since our last meeting, we've conducted a full RFP and completed an art selection for our outdoor art project. There's some photos here which we'll pass around. The selected artist is Wendy Klemperer, and she has kind of a unique style. You'll see in some of these photographs here of work she's done elsewhere throughout the country. She tends to do a lot of animals. We're proposing 2 sculptures. One would be a bear and the other one being a bison that would inhabit the 2 traffic circles out here right at the beginning of the terminal loop. And the buffalo would replace the painted buffalo, which has lost a good portion of his paint at this point. It's been a rough winter. And then the bear would be on the traffic circle right behind it. The scene is recalling the Lewis and Clark history here downtown, where I think it was Lewis shot the buffalo and then was pursued by the bear. So it's actually draws on Lewis and Clark history, the theme of the work. And she's planning, in our interview, she said she's planning to install some pretty large boulders, kind of like the ram in some of those pictures. And the bear would sort of be stalking up over top of the boulders, looking at the buffalo, and then the buffalo would be up on top of the hill out there on the traffic circle. I'll pass around, she's got some renderings, some hand drawings that she's done in her actual proposal that you can take a look at too, of the scene, and then the 2 animals to kind of give you an idea what she's thinking about it. In our RFP, we provided for a budget of $40,000 for the 2 pieces, and that's what she's proposing is $40,000 for the 2 pieces, and they would be installed this fall. She's planning to get the work done over the summer and ship everything up here, and September is where we've kind of tentatively targeted for the installation of the 2 pieces. In addition, the committee, the selection committee, felt strongly that it would be a good idea to bring her up here to take a look at the community and some of the outdoor art that exists, and potentially take a look at the CM Russell, so she has an idea of the art history of the community. And so we would look to do that in addition to the contract. We would try to bring her up here in March to take a look at the site also. She's not been out here for a visit at all, so she's got our measurements and what she can find on Google Earth, and that's about all she's seen of the site. So we'd recommend, per the recommendation of the committee, that we award a contract to Wendy Klemperer for the 2 pieces of art in a budget of $40,000.
Where is she located at?
She is out of New York. I think she's out of Brooklyn.
What will happen to the buffalo that's out there now?
It's a good question. I don't know if somebody could restore that. I think I don't know if it was our particular buffalo or just the location that beat it up so badly. I mean, that location gets extreme wind and, gets sand right off the road. Or if just the paint that was used wasn't as hardy as some of the other locations. But we would definitely pull it out of there, and I don't know if maybe we could donate that to somebody that might want to restore that and have it. A lot of the paint is off of it now. I was looking even just yesterday.
It's going to end up in the upper shop.
You'll see it in my yard.
Get it repainted and put it on the front steps, that'd be good.
So what about lighting? Do we have a chance to provide lighting as in some of the photographs here?
Yeah, it's not in the proposal. We can. As it turns out, that island has electric to it. There's a pole in the first island. The Bear Island doesn't have any electric. My recommendation there would be to wait until we redo that portion of the road, because the road improvements we did just a couple years ago end right behind the first island. In the next couple of years, we're going to be tearing up that part of the road on down, and that would give us a good opportunity to saw cut under there and get some electric into that island. So she is going to provide a lighting layout of what she would recommend, locations, wattages, that type of thing. And then we can either choose to do the lighting now, especially on the first one, or I would recommend we wait until we do the road project and include it in that. The first one wouldn't be that hard, I don't think, because there is electric in that island. So if we wanted to light the buffalo, that'd be fairly easy. With the new lighting, though, with those LED lights that surround that area, it's very bright in that location already. So we can kind of look at that and see what we think. But there's quite a bit of lighting there. Those LEDs are the resolution is much higher than the yellow lights we had before.
So we're looking for a motion on the recommendation from staff on the RFP.
40,000. 40,000. For some metal.
It's a piece of
art.
Well, I was going to get a motion on the floor and then allow for discussion.
I move we approve, or we accept the recommendation of staff and approve the hiring of whatever her name is.
Wendy Klemperer.
Wendy Klemperer.
There's a couple more E's and R's in there.
Yeah, there's a lot of E's and R's.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second the motion.
Some serious hesitation.
There is.
What were the other options?
There were 5 total proposals, and we had one that was kind of an original concept, and it was a bronze of a Native American lady with some geese flying over top of her. That one was shortlisted, and we did interview them. The third one that was shortlisted was a rusted, kind of a heavy structure of rusted metal, buffalo and a bear. And she has some work down in Bozeman, quite a few pieces down in Bozeman, it looks like. And she's from Bozeman. Oh, that's right, the snails in Helena, I don't know if you've ever seen those, but there's 3 huge snails in a traffic median.
That one, just so you know, that one was built out of mechanical components though as well. And so in addition to having a wildlife scape, it also had a mechanical component to it, which for me detracted from.
You didn't like that?
I didn't like it.
Yeah.
She had, like, saying it moved?
No, just made out of gears and.
Like
and
the
some
mane
other-
on her buffalo was heavy chain on one piece she did. I actually kind of like that, and then we had another one that was two metals. It was stainless steel components and rusted metal components, buffalo and a bear. And that was a local person. And then we had one that does large painted cement, not even painted, dyed cement. So the dye's actually in there. And his things are very lifelike, but they're kind of
Whimsical.
there you go, thank you. Like he did a huge Komodo dragon outside Woodland Park Zoo in Seattle that the kids climb on and that kind of thing. It would almost be too literal for our site. And then, I'm forgetting one.
I thought there was 9.
No, there was just 5.
I think you have them all.
So I've got the cement, I've got the heavy structure, windy, the local fella, and the original bronze. Yeah, so that is 5.
There was some consideration given to local as well, and we did discuss the fact that the short list included out-of-state, except the Bozeman resident, right? The bronze.
The bronze fella he actually works out of, I think, Kalispell
That's right.
Whitefish.
Right.
And the other local, while it was an interesting proposal and there were some good sketches to it, he had no experience with a structure this large or a artistic project this large. And so we ruled some of that out as well.
And the bronze is a really beautiful piece, but to stay within the budget, the lady stands 5 feet tall. And we had a hard time, when we went out there and looked at the site after the interview, we have a hard time figuring out where you could put that it would really be visual from the distance that you're looking at it. Because when you come in on the entry road, you're looking at that median from quite a distance. And as you get closer, that piece at the speed you're going, it's almost a waste of bronze because it's going to have such good detail to it, but you're winging by it at 20 miles an hour. Where these sculptures, they're not meant to be studied in that kind of detail. They've got almost emotion to them in the way she does it with that kind of sketch metal. So I think at that speed and at that size, they'll get your attention and look very nice.
An interesting comment I would offer, because I ended up on the committee, though I was not, I'll point out, in favor of the original process, is that we had 3 commissioners and Jay Russell from the community. And I want to say, correct me if I'm wrong here, Dan, but after the first round, even with everyone's different preferences in art and style, we were in agreement on the top 3 right out of the gate.
Yeah, without a doubt.
Without a doubt. So that's kind of a small miracle in itself, to some extent.
And even after the interviews,
Yes.
there was only 3 of us left on the committee at the interview, but it was unanimous. For Wendy.
I take it that a cast bronze of comparable size would be much more than $40,000.
Yeah, and that was what we struggled with. The cast bronze, you had to make it, the total structure with the geese was about 8 feet tall, but the gal herself was about 5 feet. And I think that it's a really neat piece, but I think if we were going to do that, maybe like the island out here or something where you're closer to it and you could really, study it and see it well.
Or even
inside.
in the lobby.
In the lobby,
We talked
yeah.
about that as being the
Yeah.
perfect spot for it.
I think the budget outside would have had to have been 3 to 4 times. But his work was spectacular.
It was very pretty
Spectacular.
structured. And it's a neat concept he has, incorporating the flight, and the Native American history and, that. But again, one of the things, I don't know how many of you remember back to and certainly Vince, you don't, but back to the board retreat where we were talking about the roadway renovation. At the time, we had not done the new landscaping. We wanted to incorporate more boulders, more natural trees, and then that's what we proposed for the first time. And we want to introduce this outdoor art element. The idea at the time was to have sort of 3 different subject matters eventually: Lewis and Clark history, a Russell piece, and then something commemorating Lend-Lease. And so this sort of checks the Lewis and Clark box. Then in the future we had talked about something commemorating Russell history, and then eventually a Lend-Lease piece was kind of the 3 things we had proposed.
And so this, I believe I'm correct in saying this money is in the budget.
It's a capital project,
Yeah,
yes.
yes.
It was,
Right.
yeah.
Okay.
Of the variety of different funding sources we have, where is this money coming from?
It's just out of our normal operating,
Operating.
parking, food, concessions, land rents, that type of thing.
Discretionary money?
Just capital dollars.
I guess my only thought is, having seen a lot of airports, especially Denver Airport, they put the wild Mustang out there, which in itself isn't bad, but then they add the red eyes to it.
Yeah.
Has anybody seen that?
I think we discussed that during the
Discussed
proposal.
that.
In
Yes.
Denver, yeah.
Oh,
And
yeah.
to me, you wander, come around the corner and you see this beautiful airport, and then you see this
Giant blue horse.
Mustang, and it's like, what are we looking at here?
And then they say it's not the Broncos either. It's,
Exactly. So you want something that kind of blends in with the structure that you're working with, and that totally does not, as well as the Westin Hotel in Denver is totally out of, I don't know how they got that through. But the animals in there, it's almost like you're looking at the skeleton, the skeletal shape of it. And I'm wondering if that's, and I think that's the hesitation that, I don't know if that's the hesitation that the rest of us are talking about. But to me, as you come around looking at two skeletons on the rocks, is that the right image that we want to portray going around? Or do you guys feel from the way it did is that it's not going to be portrayed as much as a skeleton, as much as a rustic art piece, I guess?
Only from my own perspective, I didn't see it as a skeleton. I saw it as a bit of an abstract of an animal.
A sketch, if you will.
it's a little more contemporary. She has pieces in, for instance, Fort Collins. She did something with the city down there. She has quite a few. Yeah, we can certainly open the blinds up and take a look at the spot.
What the other ones, Roxanne, was first picture?
I agree, if they actually were skeletons, that'd be creepy.
You have a question for
From the rusty vulture.
Was there any consideration given to restoring the buffalo and doing it correctly? I recall some of the other ones in town where they actually, after they had them all painted up, then they put an acrylic sealer on them, protect them from the elements longer term.
I have to ask you to speak to that, John. I can't.
Yeah, we never really just, thought we'd do that. I mean, no matter what we do to it, it's still a plaster piece. I mean, it's still gonna, have its limitations and what you can do with it. Given that location, I can't think of a harsher location to put that kind of piece. It's gonna get the brunt of the wind on the hill, and it gets that sand kicked up out of the road, that's gonna be hitting it. Not to mention the UV and then the cold. I just think it's a tough spot to put that piece long-term. I mean, if you look at what we said in the RFP is it has to be something that can withstand, a long-term, exposure to these elements. And I think most of all of the proposals we got are, 40 or 50-year pieces. Realistically, they probably last forever.
I'll probably go out of fashion before they rust away.
Yeah. Yeah, we do, I mean, just for background, we do get quite a few, I don't know, I wouldn't call them compliments, but we do get quite a few people that really like the sculpture down in Bozeman. There's quite a few sculptures in that terminal building and around that terminal building now. And I've heard it multiple times from people going through, this is really nice, you should incorporate, some of what we see down there.
I agree. I mean, I do. The Bozeman terminal is very nice.
Yeah, and so I think, it's we've invested quite a bit trying to get the grounds to look better out front with the landscaping things, and I think this, this really does sort of cap that off and finish, that roadway work.
Okay, I'm going to apologize for not saying something earlier. I mean, like months ago, and partly because it really didn't occur to me until just now, but if we're going out on the road, that's people that are coming to the airport. And that's either the locals or, or the Canadians.
Or the returning rental cars.
Or
Yeah.
returning rental cars, right. I guess what I'm thinking is, and how about something out in these islands? So right as you come out, I mean, you come out of the airport, which is very impressive, and your next thing you see is something of nice artistic value that is also right in front of the building. And obviously, the size of it doesn't have to be as big because you're not going 20 miles an hour.
Right.
You're walking across the parking lot. And, I apologize because it totally changes the RFP. I mean, the 5-foot sculpture is just fine now. Or it opens up some opportunity where you actually have something with a little more detail rather than something that you have to have an impression when you're doing 20 or 30 miles an hour.
Just going back, we did discuss, though, that this was somewhat of the start of
Yep.
some of the other areas, too, that needed to be infilled.
Right.
So it wasn't a singular plan, although that's how it's been RFP'd, to get the ball started or get the ball rolling.
Realistically, how many times are we going to spend 40 grand on the airport, though?
Well, it is two, it is two
No,
pieces.
two.
So I mean, ideally, next time we could spend maybe a little less, but I mean, if you did want a bronze, I mean, probably 40 as starters, for that.
Or whatever, you've got more options when
Yeah,
it doesn't have the size.
right.
I think it's a good
Plasma.
discussion, but if we want to go that direction, I think you have to vote down the motion. And then we have to go backwards.
Was there any discussion about doing those animals in a two-dimensional piece like this?
Plasma. The problem with two-dimensional on this site is it's visible from every side.
Okay.
Because the traffic coming back from Holman all views the back, and then there's that parking spot where people park and look at the city across from it. So I mean, you're literally looking at it from every angle.
So just to get a feel, is the primary hesitation the design, the price, the placement?
I'm
All of
struggling
the
with
above?
$40,000 for a target for the out-of-control driver to hit.
Well, I mean, if you're worried about.
Go through this process.
Yeah.
We went through the process of.
I was
the
trying to be
motion.
quiet, I was trying to.
No, not, I don't mean we went through the motion to vote on this. I mean, we went through the motion to RFP in our project for that location, and it was accepted and voted on, and everybody said yes. I may be wrong.
Probably
We did.
You're probably right, I was unanimous, I would agree.
Just hitting him.
But in terms of damage, the buffalo sits on probably 3 feet of river rock, so he's up there a good ways, and then, there's gonna be boulders around that bear to hit before you get a piece of the metal. Nonetheless, obviously, we're insured. Somebody took out a light pole just a month or so ago. Things do happen up here.
And I watched the Holiday Inn guy completely miss the turn and go across the gravel.
You were here that day. Yeah.
Dude, what were you looking at?
Slow it
Your
down.
cell phone, that's it.
Yeah.
Are you kidding me?
So, we will be pursuing, insurance companies, obviously, if there's if there's damage to, like everything else. And we're trying to pursue the light pole, I think, with an insurance company now.
I think Vince's concern is that it doesn't look lifelike enough, but it sounds as if we really can't afford something of that size that would look lifelike. Is that correct?
I think the rusted metals, none of them look particularly lifelike. And I don't know that lifelike was really what the committee was.
And lifelike's not what I'm looking for. I agree that I'm not real keen on the structure, but it's not because it's not lifelike. I'm just trying to think of an uplifting or something, when you come around the corner, that's like, wow, that's beautiful.
Like an F-16.
Oh, I wish.
Yeah, like a P-38 or something?
But, mean, I'm only one of 5, so. And some of them are actually, the buffalo, I don't know, I think about this. I'm not totally against it, I'm just not quite totally for it either.
Well, we have a motion on the floor, so one way or the other, we need to act on it.
We have to call a vote. Did we get a second?
Pardon?
Do you have a second?
Yes.
We have a second, yeah.
We have to take a vote.
Yep. All right. Maybe I better read the motion.
Can you abstain?
Yeah.
Okay, but we do formulate views upon you. Just saying.
That's right.
Okay, the motion is the staff recommends awarding a contract not to exceed $40,000 to Wendy Klemperer for the development and installation of 2 pieces of metal outdoor art. It's been moved and seconded. So, hearing no other discussion, all those in favor of the motion, please indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
All those opposed, same sign. Abstain? Can I go with an abstention? Pardon?
I had an A.
You're a nay?
An
Sorry.
I for the nay.
A nay and an abstention, and so we have 3 votes in favor. Motion passes. Gosh, you didn't tell me it's going to be so brutal at my first meeting,
Four
Brad.
votes in favor?
3.
3.
Don't you need a majority of the board?
Actually, if you have an extension, the majority still wins.
Yeah.
So if everyone abstains except one, then the one gets to choose.
But then I could vote too,
Okay.
right?
Right, you can, right.
Mhm.
Onward.
Okay. All right, that's the agenda items. Now we customarily move into airport authority comments, just going around the table. Comments?
I'll be last since I'm first.
You want to see how it goes?
Yeah.
Okay.
What we're commenting on.
Okay. Any topic, actually. Michael, you want to go first?
No further comments.
Okay.
No comments.
I have no comment.
No comments at this time?
Okay, see how that goes?
I know, I'm no comment.
You're no.
You're a quick learner.
I think they're all out of words. So additional public comments, if you have some, will you please stand and state your name for the record? Quiet bunch today. Okay, with no other business to come before the board, I declare this meeting adjourned. Would we like to have a few-minute break before we start the work session?
Please.
Please.
Yes? 10 minutes? Right, or 8 minutes and start at 2:30
By that clock.
by that clock?
You don't like it, huh?
Well, no, I just, once you brought up the idea, I'm just thinking, might make a better presentation here, and like I said, I apologize for not saying that to begin with, but.
I mean, my hope is, I mean, maybe one day we would get, I mean, we almost had a group that was interested in helping fund this, and, didn't quite go that route. But maybe, if we had a consensus, we might have.
Trying to make it work, so.
I mean, certainly the Little League program one, I think that one we could stand a good chance of fundraising, because we get a lot of military people interested in it.
About those federal dollars.
Which ones?
For the terminal, it doesn't do the
Not the national.
blind people any good?
It wasn't the national endowment for the arts, it was something else.
You're talking about the blighted areas? Yeah, I think that's the problem, is it's definitely.
We're not so blighted.
Blight. Yeah, I mean,
Take a picture when it's snowy out there. Snowball.
Yeah.
I think they're gonna be fine. I would prefer.
Doing a great
solid
job, Dad.
cast.
Great job.
That's to
Right.
be
yeah,
enormously more expensive.
yeah,
It's a shame that there's not somebody who's trying to unload something.
Yeah, and I think there's,